So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we make a return to the current version of the game rather than the test build for the next patch. And we're also making a return to a map that we have seen in the past. This is of course the Cardolan outpost, which has always been the analogous I've used for Tharbad, seeing as Tharbad isn't in the game as it stands properly, and seeing as this settlement is on a river, it's the closest thing that we have to that, and we always see Cardolan making a defence here more or less, and we are going to be seeing the same today. Cardolan are going to be one of the factions on the defence. Bit of a multi-layered battle this under normal circumstances. We very often see the river prove to be the decisive defensive point, whether the defenders outright win over here or whether the attackers can force the defenders back. Doesn't look as though that's going to be the case this time though. It looks as though the defenders are going to opt instead to defend the settlement with everything they have, which is somewhat of a rarity. I think that hasn't really happened before in a replay that I've shown anyway. There's always been at least some sort of effort to hold the river, so this is going to work out in a different way to how we usually see perhaps. So we'll be going through the attacking armies first and foremost. I have no idea if this is going to be a lore-friendly battle or not. We'll see as we go through the attacking forces. Rudow being on the attack, so I believe it is going to be the forces of evil which are going to be on the attack, but there may be one outlier, as there very often is. Underlings berserkers are going to be very useful on the attack, as well as all of the thrown projectiles that Rhudaur have at their disposal. Rhudaur are really an invaluable member of an attacking army because of all the armour-piercing punch they offer, especially in a more confined settlement like the Cardolan outpost. It's going to be very difficult for the attackers to get their archers into a good position, but up close and personal, Rudow, with the damage they can deal, going to be very, very useful with stuff like the troll hunters, the berserkers, and I'm sure that there's troll axe throwers hidden in and amongst the trees as well. The other thing they offer, of course, is armour-piercing and melee, the Woodtrow enslavers being the bodyguard unit variant of that. There's probably going to be Rhudaur axemen hidden in high numbers as well, so Rhudaur marksmen offering a little bit more long-range options as well. One problem that Rhudaur do have, of course, is defensively they're not the most savvy. They are easier to kill on an individual basis than many other armies. I mean, Dunland Spearman and Rhudaur swordsmen individually as units are very numerous, which is a good thing because they're also relatively easy to cut down with higher quality defensive troops, which in a 5v3 is something that you can always expect the defenders to have. The Rhudaur clansmen over here are a little bit bulkier, but that mainly comes from their shield value. They do not have the upgraded armour this time around, but like I said, Rudow, they can offer numbers on the attack, but the main thing they will offer is that high damage spike that you will want. Isengard, on the other hand, played by JKL, going to be a little bit of a different matter. They're a little bit more of a well-rounded, heavier faction. They're a decently multifaceted faction as well. They've got a lot of good mid to upper tier options. They may lack some of the really high end and a lot of the extreme numbers that the other orc factions can traffic in, but overall, when it comes to being finely balanced, I think Isengard make a good fist of that. Half-orc Spearguard and Dunland clansmen offer a more disposable element to their armies, but of course the triumvirate of pikemen, I'm sure we'll see the infantry and the crossbows as well, is where Isengard really base their attacks around. You know, the crossbows are going to be able to do decent damage if they can get into the right position. More difficult than you would expect on a map like this, considering the river is not being held. The defenders may very well have taken away the Uruk-hai crossbow's best opportunity to be used, given the difficult nature of the settlement for the attackers to get their skirmishes into place, but it's something the defenders are going to have to be on the lookout for, because if you allow crossbows to get good value off from the attackers, you put yourself into a really disadvantageous situation. Half-orc Guard offer a little bit more armour piercing as well, which will be useful against many of the defenders. Raiders offering a little bit of a long-range option. The Lurtz hunting pack in this version of the game, of course, we're back on the old patch, so body-piercing projectiles for foot archers still very much a thing, and the Lurtz hunting pack can take advantage of that again if they can get into the right position in the settlement. And the Trolls of the White Hand. We've seen Trolls be used consistently very well, actually, in Reforged of late, so we'll see if that's going to be the case this time around as well. Narzakai, very high-end shock infantry unit, and Champions of the White Hand will make it very difficult for any forces to sally out and meet the enemy. Speaking of which, Isengard's Underlings in Dunland, played by DF Josh, are going to be here as well. Riders of Orthanc may actually be even better at dealing with cavalry than the Champions of the White Hand. The Champions of the White Hand are significantly stronger in melee, but the Riders of Orthanc are no slouches there either. But they also have those crossbows as well. As far as mounted crossbows go, we saw Rune have got a mounted crossbow unit added in the upcoming next patch, but the Riders of Orthanc for the time being are really the only unique mounted crossbow unit that the game has to offer. The mercenary crossbows, of course, shared across a few factions. Spears of Orthanc, the footbound variant, again very good heavy spear, but primarily they're going to be all about dealing damage with those crossbows of theirs. Guard, Spearguard, couple of units of Dunlanding veterans and Dunlanding clansmen as well. There's limited options with regards to your main line of Dunland. You have to go numbers heavy. But in a situation like this, I don't think that's a bad thing, given that the attackers will have to be aggressive and they'll need numbers in the confines of the Cardolan outpost because they're going to take heavy losses pretty quickly, I would suggest. Isengard, a second Isengard army, played by Y2K86. More Dunlanders. We've got Dunlanding clansmen and veterans making up a good portion of this Isengard army as well. Once again, we've got some pikes, we've got some archers in there. We've got some more half-orc spearguard and baneguard. Interestingly, cavalry heavy here with some warg riders. Looks like a couple of units of them. And Narskai and Trolls of the White Hand hidden in and amongst here as well. And then we also have the Isengard Ballista, potentially devastating. Maybe, I mean, certainly the Isengard Ballista would have been absolutely devastating if the defenders had posted up on the river. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case, so it may be very difficult for Y2K to actually use his artillery in the way that he would like. Might be slightly easier to use a catapult or the like on a settlement such as this. And last, but by no means least, we have another numbers-heavy faction in Fire Captain Les McBurney playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. His general is in the Goblin Infantry unit, so they're going to be held back. And it does mean that you can use units like the Goblin King's Bodyguard and the inevitable Blackbacks a little bit more freely. A couple of units of Cave Trolls, not quite the same as a mass-pushing unit in the way that Great Shield Infantry are. They have a tendency to punch through lines more easily, but also isolate themselves, so they actually require, ironically, a little bit more finesse, I think, to utilise the Cave Trolls. But if they can be used, even with the density of the defence that's there, it's the sort of thing that you can use to hunt down rangers that get a little bit too close to the action, or crossbows or the like. Drake Broodlings can be used for much the same sort of thing. They can barrel through a line as well quite quickly, but they're really an all or nothing kind of unit. They can either be extremely effective or they can be next to useless depending upon when and how they're deployed. We'll have to wait and see if Les here can do that. Heavy Goblin crossbows, kind of similar to the Uruk-hai crossbows. They are a little bit less well-rounded in terms of their equipment, but doesn't really make too much of a difference. They will have much the same effect on the enemy. A couple of units of Black Uruks, Heavy Goblin Spears and Heavy Goblin Infantry. Of course, there's going to be a few more units. You can see the gaps already. The Goblins do have a fair few that can hide after all. Now then, moving on to the defence, starting off with the Hobbit folk, played by Froggy. So much of his army is going to be hidden away in the trees. Now, we have the Bjornings, who, as far as the cavalry unit goes, are pretty scary, but as we've already mentioned, with Champions of the White Hand and Riders of Orthanc, and of course regular warg riders moving around, it'll be difficult for the defenders to use their own cavalry like this. The Hobbits may as well bring the Bjornings though, because much of their army isn't actually that expensive. There's apparently another unit up here that is the Great Eagles hiding in the hills. Classic position to hide a unit this. If the attackers are doing their due diligence, they'll send someone to have a little root around in the hills and uncover them, but if they don't, the Great Eagles could be the sort of thing in the late game with their massive charge values that actually turn the tide of the battle, so we'll be waiting to see on that one. A couple of units of Proudfoot Protectors, the key really to any Hobbit defence, crossbows but also pikes and melee. Fantastic unit all round. The Ents, very similar to the Trolls of course. The rest of the army undoubtedly is hidden. That's actually 3 units of Proudfoots. Also saw some farmers of Buckland hidden away there as well. And the other 2 armies are going to be the other 2 petty kingdoms of Arnor. Arthedain, played by Medexa, has got some Knights of Illuminus out here. Again, the same problem may arise for the Knights in the sense that they're going to be having to contend with Riders of Orthanc, the Champions of the White Hand, the Wargs. It's going to be a little bit messy perhaps, but we'll have to wait and see. The rest of the Arthedain army is in this gigantic blob here. Plenty of Arthedain pikemen, as you would expect. Going to be important for locking off these choke points. The Dunedain Peacekeepers will be good at dealing with a lot of the low-end units of Dunlanders, half-orcs and goblins that are going to be rushing forth in this battle. The Grey Company, another mounted unit, but as mounted rangers, of course, they've got the body piercing, something they will actually keep in the next version of the game as well, one of the few units to do so, so that'll be a very important tool Arthedain still have access to in future versions of the game. Arthedain Man-at-Arms are in here in high numbers, of course. This is a fairly large army, actually, you would suggest, so going to be good for holding on to the choke points, but they're going to need a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more flash if they are to do damage quickly as well. I mean, it's very likely there are woods at the north in there. There's probably Troll Slayers and Rangers hidden in amongst that blob as well. And last, but by no means least, the Womb Raider, who is the player who sent me this battle replay playing as Cardolan on home turf. He certainly has Dunedain Rangers, as we can see, going to be one of the most important units on the field today for the defenders if they are to be victorious. Minhiriath Archers are also here, plenty of pikes, Wardens of Tir and Gorthad are in there. Tharbad Warhammers will be really good, especially against the Isengard contingent of the attackers. Of course, Cardolan have got their own crossbows, so it's the sort of thing which Isengard and the Misty Mountains will not have a monopoly on, and of course Dunland. So this may be a battle defined by crossbows, and Cardolan's saving grace may be the fact that the defenders can set up how they choose, and the attackers don't have much of a choice really but to accept the damage coming to them. Trebuchet up on the hill could be extremely deadly as well. And finally there is a unit of cavalry out here, the Royal Court of House Rhudaur, who are hidden. So the Great Eagles, the Royal Court, these units could bide their time and wait to the end. If they're uncovered early, however, this could be a large waste of money from which the defenders cannot recover from. Regardless, we will be making a bit of a cut here because it's going to take a little while for the attackers to cross the river and actually start getting into a position where they can attack the settlement, especially if they want to surround it and hit it from all three sides that they are able to. So yeah, it's going to be a cut, and we will rejoin when the battle is truly getting underway. So the attackers are not going to be fooled here, as they are going to send a search party up into the hills to find hidden units, and this is bad news for Froggy, of course, because these Great Eagles could have been a real ace in the hole for the end of the game, but now he's going to have to use them more quickly. I don't know what the benefit necessarily to sequestering them away inside the settlement is likely to be, but I mean, I don't really know what choices he has here, because if he continues to run away, the Riders of Orthanc will be able to remain in range and simply shoot them out of the sky with their crossbows, so I think they are going to have to either get inside the settlement or be used very, very aggressively right from the outset here, which there is of course the danger that you're not going to be able to get as much value as you would like out of them. In the very distance you can see the champions of the right hand kind of buzzing the defensive positions of the fast movers outside. The Bjornings were also getting a little bit close to the Riders of Orthanc earlier, but that wasn't really worth rejoining the game for. This, however, most assuredly is, and the Great Eagles looks as though they are going to take the aggressive approach. And I mean, there are some exposed units over here, there are some Urukai crossbows and some Snaga skirmishers that could be charged into, and the Great Eagles of course have got such a devastating charge that this is going to be very much worth their while. Plenty of damage being done. They do need to be careful though, because the Great Eagles count as cavalry, so stuff like the Wargs and Riders of Orthanc, especially champions of the White Hand, will have a big bonus against them. They are going to charge in here, however, they're going to do a lot of damage there to the Snaga skirmishers, but the Great Eagles are an expensive unit, so how much value they can actually get off in here while they're being hounded by all of these other units. The Ents are also moving in, perhaps by way of a rescue party, but I don't know if this is necessarily going to pan out for them. They'll do okay against champions of the White Hand in sustained melee, but Isengard have got plenty of tools to be dealing with upstarts such as that. You know, the Great Eagles trying to charge in there some pikemen. I mean, they did some damage, but you can see that they've already started to take a fair amount of damage as a result. That's a lot of damage they just dealt, however, to a rather condensed group of half-orcs and Urukai raiders. Nothing too high tier has been killed by the Great Eagles so far, but you have to say, they have actually done a decent job at killing off a fair chunk of the Isengard forces as they've moved forward. Trolls of the White Hand are moving in. I mean, as much as the Great Eagles have been used pretty well in a poor situation, I don't think there was any real need to commit the Ents forward into this battle, and they're being made to pay for that, because the Ents aren't going to get much value off at all, especially not against Black Wolves. And now with the support of Trolls, the units much more their own size, they're going to be utterly overwhelmed here, which is an inglorious end, really, to the mighty tree folk. The Great Eagles have been killed to the last eagle. But a decent amount of damage done. I mean, considering the situation, you'd want more from your Great Eagles, I would argue, given that they're supposed to be a bit of a finishing move in the late game of a battle like this. But given the situation, I think Froggy did okay with them. To lose the Ents as well, though, means I think the attackers will actually be fairly happy with how things have gone. A little bit of support coming from up on top of the walls as well from Cardolan. The Minhiriath sharpshooters can really take their pick of the Isengard units that are moving into place. That was a blank shot. How typical. Minotaur Armor and Gatekeepers are also ready to fire should the need arise, but they need to be careful here. One thing that the defenders need to do in a battle like this is use their skirmish as well. And while they can take their pick of targets here, it may be better to be a little bit more cautious, wait for them to become embroiled in a battle within the settlement, and then they can't really disengage. Routing is also more likely. The Knights of Illuminus trying to follow or continue what the Great Eagles started, really. And they do have an opportunity here to get a rather nice charge off into the Uruk-hai Raiders. Not quite as devastating as the one we saw the Great Eagles get, but worthwhile nonetheless. Now they'll have to beat a hasty retreat back inside the settlement with the champions of the White Hand very much on the way to ruin their day if they do not. Knights of Illuminus are better off the charge, but the champions of the White Hand very much built from the ground up as an anti-cavalry unit. Still, the noises of battle going on over here, which is a little bit bizarre. Riders of Orthanc on the way across as well. That will only make any further incursions by the defending cavalry more difficult. Y2K 86 getting into place with his Isengard army, so he's going to be leading the way perhaps on this assault. Looks like the Drake Broodings did just charge into the Bjornings, but off the charge they'll do okay, but in sustained melee the Bjornings will most certainly have the edge there. There's a Buckland also back there, a surprisingly savage unit of course with their high charge bonus. The thing about the Hobbits is as well, they can be such a weird faction to fight because so much of their units can hide anywhere, so many of their units can hide anywhere I should say. And then they pop into view and all of a sudden you're facing a far more substantial force than you initially thought you were. Another blank shot from the Imperial Sharpshooters. I don't know what they were going after. Maybe the Lurtz hunting pack? I don't know what they're necessarily shooting at. They don't have the best of angles. Maybe they are trying to return fire into the crossbows. Yeah, maybe the Minotaur Romain Gatekeepers were the target and that's why the crossbows are retreating down off the walls now. Spearman, I mean all of these front lines ready and waiting. Dunedain Rangers already looking like they're going to fire. I assume that's because the Lurtz hunting pack are in there. Any Dunlending clansmen they manage to kill off will be a bonus only. Thieves of Tharlad also ready. Dunlending clansmen are already wavering and very tired given the exertions outside the walls, so another potential upshot from the kamikaze charging of the Great Eagles early on in this fight. What going on over here? So we do have those Royal Court of House the Rhudaur who are still hidden, very fortunately as well, because if the Riders of Orthanc saw them, a flurry of crossbow bolts and then being slightly better in melee against other cavalry would spell disaster for the Cardolan riders there. Champions of the White Hand, the first one to go forward, maybe trying to ward off the Thieves of Tharbad from getting an early rout on this one unit of clansmen. Uruk-hai crossbows are also loitering with malicious intent. Y2K's army spreading out. I mean, they definitely have their army ready to push forward. DF Josh also with Dunland, so two armies going to be attacking from this choke point over here. But at least one going to be moving through from what I will term as the main gate. There are two choke points down here though, which so far no army looks to be making an immediate beeline for. I assume, is that going to be DF Mark's responsibility? Quite possibly. Whatever happened to the Misty Mountins army? There's McBurney also in there, so maybe he could also take up the mantle. I would recommend two armies honestly go for the two choke points, and then this is a nasty area, so maybe go for a slightly slower burn of an approach up here. Thieves of Tharbad throwing their projectiles down from on high. Only a couple of warning volleys only though. So far it's more just the setup phase of the battle than anything else. Two dead thieves up on the walls. Thieves of Tharbad very much fighting home turf of course. We don't have a real Tharbad in the game as of right now. Bjorning's waiting, starting to see a little bit more movement over here. Dunlending clansmen and wargs starting to swamp forward. The Bjornings need to be a little bit careful. The wargs already moving in a gallop. So yeah, they are going to retreat back within the settlement, or are they? I don't know about this. I think the Bjornings could end up getting utterly surrounded as a result of this. The warg skirmishers definitely will do the business. I mean, they'll get a decent amount of damage off the charge here into the clansmen, but it's clansmen only. They're a very low value unit. The Bjornings cost significantly more, and this kind of efficiency, I don't know, the use of the expensive units from Froggy so far has been questionable. I mean, I suppose he's put his units into disadvantageous situations and then got the best out of them given the situation they were in, but still, Alpha Protector's offering a little bit of support from the walls, but if Yawning's broken and fighting to the death, yeah, definitely not really all that worthwhile, but maybe in conjunction with the crossbow bolts dealing with those Warg Javelin man, the situation does get to be viewed in a different light. Clansmen there, Minhiriath archers, plenty of skirmishers in pretty good positions here. Opportunity for some good crossfires to be set up by the defenders, but it kind of relies on the attackers to really move forward in a big way through the main gate. If they don't do that, then and elect to go for the slower burn approach over here, then it'll be difficult for them. Sniper skirmishers moving in, maybe the game of cat and mouse is well and truly beginning now. Uruk-hai crossmen are there, DF Mark and his Rhudaur force maybe backing up Isengard. By the look of this rather large and nasty looking column, I think the south gates are going to be handled by the Misty Mountains, maybe on their own. And that would be interesting. 2 armies on singular choke points over here, and then 1 army across 2 choke points. Seems counterintuitive, but maybe it will work. Maybe the Misty Mountains simply has to bide their time, and they can be the ones that wait the most, while their allies soften things up in more violent engagements on the other 2 choke points. I don't know though, I think I'd still prefer to see 2 attacking armies in the south than anything else. And here we have spears, sniper skirmishers using their javelins, trying to do what damage they can, whittle the defenders down. Obviously every defender lost is worth significantly more than a singular attacker, but Rhudaur marksmen. I did say at the start of this battle I thought it would be a little bit more unlikely that the attackers could be more efficient with their archers, but they're able to get their Rhudaur marksmen to a pretty decent position here. But if any defending unit was to absorb arrow fire like this, it would definitely be the Greenway Garrison Spearman. Their shield value is actually pretty damn good. They're not amazing in melee by any means, with one of the lowest attacks for a militia spear that you can get in the game, but very good at absorbing punishment. As soon as their morale holds together, the Riders of Orthanc we saw briefly there in the south. Arthedain marksman in place. So far, still a rather quiet affair. It looks empty over here because the Hobbitry and arms are hidden, Banderbrass archers are hidden, a lot of Hobbitry and arms are hidden, so it looks like a freebie for the attackers, but I don't think Dunland and Isengard here in the north are fooled. They know that the hobbits are waiting for them. So once the attack begins in earnest, we'll wait and see. What have we here? Arthedain marksman. Walls waiting. Knights of the Numinous actually managing to chase the Riders of Orthanc off. I mean, the thing is, you can't continue the chase against a unit like this because they can simply keep pinning you with those crossbows as they run backwards. And then when they're weak enough, the Riders of Orthanc will fancy their chances against the Knights of the Numinous in melee. So, Knights of the Numinous are doing the right thing by disengaging from that particular fight. Looks like we might be seeing the start of an engagement now. Line Rangers starting to fire in. Again, I'm not sure I would necessarily be firing in now. I mean, it is a decent enough blob, but almost all of it is made up of very low-end units. Maybe it's just a couple of volleys to let the attackers know they can't afford to get too comfortable and take too much time over things, otherwise their manpower will start to abandon them over the long haul. A little bit closer in now though. Are they trying to tempt the defenders into attacking them on a singular choke point and not allowing them the crossfire they've set up? So far though, the defenders most certainly not taking the bait. Landing clansmen on the way forwards. There's a lot of archers up here. There's some Wards of the North, there's Proudfoot protectors, so things could get very, very uncomfortable very quickly for the Dunlanders as they move in here as the first wave. The hobbits do reveal themselves now. First engagement, the officer of this unit going up against a singular spearman. Bandits also on the way forth. Giving back a little bit more now, maybe a little bit too exposed for their liking. Bandits are units that Dunland and Cardolan share, of course. Not the only one, we may see Quathlo trackers reveal themselves at some point as well. Farmers of Buckland reveal themselves, and we're seeing the first out-and-out melee engagement, really, as the Farmers of Buckland start using their scythes on the chainmail-clad Dunlanding veterans. Band of Brass archers firing away still. Longbottom mob flinging their projectiles as well, so the hobbits wasting no time in getting stuck into the Isengard attackers here. Proudfoot protectors still biding their time and waiting for something a little bit more impressive to come forward, though. The basic archers and the Longbottom mob useful for dealing decent damage over a longer period of time. Hobbitry and arms, plenty of hobbitry and arms, as we already alluded to earlier, so overwhelming with numbers, even for a faction like Dunland with the backing of Isengard, is going to be a little bit more difficult against a force like the hobbits. Lots of armour piercing as well, so not going to be able to rely on higher defensive stats either. And what the champions of the White Hand are doing, maybe seeing an opportunity to try and go after the Thieves of Tharbad, but there are Minhiriath spears over there, and there are Tharbad warhammers, so surely they're going to rout as a result of doing this, yeah. Don't know what JKL was hoping to achieve there, but whatever it is, he has now lost the champions of the White Hand. They may return. I don't know, only 6 of them though. They might not. They definitely won't now that a volley of those crossbow bolts has come in. And is it just the Misty Mountains that are making their way around here? Yeah, slowly but surely. They're still not in place yet though, and the battle is starting to begin in other areas. Maybe a little bit more slowly over here, trading a little bit of ammunition and a few units here and there, but it's over here where the battle most assuredly has started. In come the trolls now, hoping to do some not insubstantial damage to all of these hobbits on the front line, which they should be able to do. I mean, all of the armour piercing is there, but you would still imagine that the hobbits are going to be fragile enough that the trolls will do very serious damage to them. Archers firing away, another unit of Uruk-hai archers moving in support, and I think, yeah, Proudfoot protectors are firing now, so perhaps the arrival of the trolls has convinced them that they need to be taking this initial engagement just that little bit more seriously. Forward come some farmers of Buckland to help shore things up. I mean, that armour piercing, more useful than the armour piercing provided by the hobbitry and arms. Peacekeepers will be a very good unit against most of these forces. Meanwhile, Sniper skirmishers almost routing off here. Death by 1,000 cuts is it going to be for the attackers over here? It's a lot of projectiles so that the defenders are having to use just to play tag with the attackers, so the attackers probably won't be too disappointed with how that's gone so far. Misty Mountains spreading themselves out, trying to stay away from the walls as best they can. Keep their elite units out of reach of the very dangerous Dunedain Steel Bowmen, and yeah, going after the Blackback Mountain Berserkers, not surprising at all, a very dangerous foe. The other archers can go after other things a little bit more freely. Going after the Heavy Goblin crossbows is not a bad idea, especially seeing as the crossbows themselves are in the process of forcing the Wardens of the North back off the wall. Grey Company will start firing away now as well, so this is going to be a fair amount of damage here that the Misty Mountains are taking, but they're spread out enough to the point where it's actually not too bad, and then the Misty Mountains of course have got more manpower to spare than most factions in the game, so if not the most, so they won't be too concerned about that, I don't think. Meanwhile, Band of Brass archers continuing, this front line continues in its current vein. Bandits are there. Uruk-hai archers. Uruk-hai archers do seem to be having the desired effect against this one unit of Band of Brass archers, but Dunedain Rangers firing away. Using ranger ammunition on this blob, I mean, it will do a lot of damage very quickly, but is it worth it? Is there anything in there from the defending point of view that needs to be dealt with by one of your most important defensive tools? I don't know. Will come Rudow now. Maybe the attack here at the main gate is also going to start beginning in earnest. Dunland Spearman again, they're just sort of taking up a position in the crossroads, but the defenders doesn't look like they're going to be tempted into taking an engagement they don't much like the look of. And also, if they can split the attackers by going down several roads, that's when the crossfire could prove to be really effective. Actually, you could get shots into the back over there, and over there, based on the positioning of the crossbows, the archers, stuff like the thieves of Tharbad. So could be a pretty nasty situation that for the attackers, but for the moment it hasn't truly begun. Nor is this over here. The Misty Mountains have got a bit of a conundrum as well. Do they go all in on one of these choke points, or do they split their singular army down two? It's a more difficult decision than you would think, actually. Grey Company moving backwards. The Hobbits actually forcing Isengard and Dunland back as a result of all of the range support they're getting. The armour piercing in melee, something else which is giving them a little edge. Uruk-hai archers have probably been the best aspect of the Isengard assault so far, just because they have managed to be a bit of a pain. There goes a bit of a frame drop, a little bit concerning. Banderbrass archers, second unit of Banderbrass archers. Banderbrass archers also armor piercing in melee, of course, with those clubs, so as much as individually the Hobbits can be overcome by Isengard and even by Dunland to a certain extent, the damage they will take by doing so is significant, and then it's all of the supporting units that the Hobbits have which are the real problems. The Trolls, again, the Trolls moving forward on their own. We've already seen the champions of the White Hand try and do this to no avail, and I mean, surely with the Tharbad Warhammers here as well, they're going to meet exactly the same fate, so I'm not entirely certain what the hope was here. No matter. They will do some damage to the Tharbad Warhammers, but as a singular unit goes, I think there's not really any unit on the field which is better equipped for dealing with the Trolls 1v1 in pure melee terms than the Tharbad Warhammers are. The Troll Slayers getting a javelin volley off first are maybe the one exception to that. And what remains of the Snaga. Snaga now routing off. A few javelins finding their marks, but nowhere near enough. So the goblins thinking about it, thinking about making a foray into the settlement. Heavy goblin spears, and make for a very efficient front line. Wow, this engagement then. Hobbits continuing to force the enemy back, and they are actually now able to engage stuff like Uruk-hai archers in melee. Uruk-hai archers very poor in melee after all. They're going to need some more units on the front line, and again their reinforcements are pretty far away, so they've got to start their units moving quite a long way ahead of time, and I don't know if one unit of half-orc spear guard is necessarily going to be enough to transform their fortunes here. Snaga skirmishers and Uruk-hai archers wait, Wardens of the North. There's a lot of range power that's coming down from on high as well. Maybe again a little too much. I don't know if there's necessarily a need for all of these units necessarily to be opening up all at once. But perhaps I'm wrong. Wardens of the North there as well, so two units of the mighty Steelbone. The one remaining troll comes back now as well. The Hobbits, actually, a lot of them are routing. That's quite unfortunate because they had the momentum, but maybe not the quality on the front line necessary to really follow through with a counter-attack like that, and I think the combination of the javelins and maybe the arrival of some slightly heavier units has forced units of 100 Hobbits to rout when they have the momentum. That is the downside of playing as the Hobbits. they are a little bit fragile when it comes to such things. Again, the attackers actually making fairly good use of their archers, even though I thought it would be a fairly difficult ask for them to do so. That was a rather fortuitous hit. The defenders will be hoping for far more of that from their artillery. It may only be against very basic units, but still a dead-on hit like that is still going to be enough to deal enough damage to certainly be worthwhile. Nazkai are moving forward. Now Nazkai are moving forward all on their own again, although on this occasion they will obviously dominate against Minhiriath's spears in melee, but I mean they are a pretty open target here. There should be archers down that way. I mean, more worryingly for them, there are Minhiriath sharpshooters which are going to be able to hit them in the back, so all the Minhiriath spears need to do really is stay alive for longer than 30 seconds, and many of those Nazkai will be scythed down by crossbow bolts. The spears can then do the rest. Powerful Baneguard moving in support, which is better than nothing I suppose, but it is weird how there's just one element of this force moving forward, the rest are simply waiting on the crossroads. Oof. One glancing blow, one again direct hit. Trebuchet so far proving to be a very worthwhile investment. The Misty Mountains creeping forward a little bit more slowly, being a little bit more cautious, but that's understandable given the fact they are on their own and they have more ground to cover than their allies who have already got the festivities underway. The Hobbits have now been forced fully off the front line, really. This one unit of Banderbrass archers being used as a rear guard while they can presumably reorganise their defence. A more Arthedainian based defence from this point onwards by the look of things. Some Arthedain marksmen also very much in position. Sniper skirmishers though, I mean this is the thing, I think the javelins for the attacks have done a pretty good job so far. There's a mountain of corpses, most of them Isengard and Dunlanders, but they've got far more to burn through than the Hobbits, and we've already seen the Hobbits' weakness when it comes to their morale, so maybe the situation is okay from that perspective. Minhiriath archers continue to fire away. Sharpshooters now out of ammunition, but having used it on Nazkai, I suggest it was very much a worthwhile thing. In melee, I think they will have the edge over the Uruk-hai crossbows because they've got those maces, of course. That little bit of armour-piercing bite in melee as well makes them a much more multifaceted unit than their Isengard counterparts. More now moving forward, so more of a generalised assault at this point. Rhudaur swordsmen clashing with the Minhiriath and Greenways of Cardolan. But Dunland peacekeepers moving in, and peacekeepers will really be the difference maker here. Whereas before it was just a solid front line against a numbers front line, you've now got a unit which is ideally suited really for facing off against the foes that are here. That's pretty vicious, and yeah, unsurprisingly, we've already seen the Hobbits rout in their hundreds. Now we're going to see the same from Rudow as a result of direct hits from the Trebuchet. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle, and Minhiriath spears having taken on the Nazkai with the help of the crossbows, they are now holding the front line on their own merit. Tharbad warhammers, pikes ready to move in, as well as more ranged units, and I did say the positioning of this could be painful for the attackers, and it has proven to be so far. Plenty of fire arrows, so perhaps seeing the opportunity in conjunction with the artillery to try and rout off more of the attacking forces. I mean, between the Hobbits and Cardolan, they need to hope they don't get friendly fire. Heavy Goblin crossbows routing, and considering it was just them and some Heavy Goblin spears in here, the application of fire arrows being used very nicely against the Misty Mountains as well. The Misty Mountains actually being forced back without any conflict in melee actually breaking out. So not the start the Misty Mountains would have been hoping for to their foray into the settlement, and their allies are currently being really put under the cosh here. Essenmore's Troll Hunters trying to get into a good position. The Grey Company themselves are also getting into a pretty nasty position to shoot right down the line here. Nothing too scary on that front line, but it's a big enough blob to the point where I think you do need to take advantage of it. So the Grey Company with a couple of volleys, and then surely they will leave their peacekeeper brethren to finish things off. This front line made up of both hobbits and men of Arthedain, still getting pinned by those Uruk-hai archers, who so far have proven to be the standout performer from the attackers over here, you would suggest, but it's been a very bloody fight indeed. The Longbottom mob trying to go forward and support the Vanderbrass archers, but ultimately being overcome. These counterattacks from Froggy, a little reckless, but they haven't been for nothing at the very least. But I think maybe the time has come in this battle for the hobbits to be a little bit more conservative with what they actually have remaining to them. Further over here, the half-orcs clashing with the Minhiriath, but again taking hits from the rear. The presence of the pikes on the front line, the Balls of Tin Gorthard and the Proudfoot Protectors, proving to be a real problem so far for them. The odd flaming arrow still falls from the sky. These Minhiriath archers are in such an ideal position to shoot into the back of that front line over there. There are Uruk-hai pikemen over there as well, which a fantastic target for the Minhiriath archers to be going after at the best of times. Routing off anything else in there will be a very nice bonus. Lurt's hunting pack trying to get into a position on the walls where they too can take advantage of things, but you can see that very quickly the Minhiriath archers down there have seen them. Yeah, Warns of the North are also going to be firing at them as well, so I don't think the Lurt's hunting pack are going to last too long, and also the archers just across the way, they recognise the danger this unit poses, and immediately they're going after it to try and finish it off. Again, another nice hit from the Trebuchet. So far the Trebuchet has done very, very well. RNG perhaps favours the defenders today. Dunland Rangers moving forward. Those bandits are taking a bit of a beating. Half-orc Spearguard now being engaged by Dunland Rangers, who are presumably out of ammunition, but probably been sending forward individual units into a meat grinder for no really good reason. I mean, he can kill off Snaga skirmishers easily enough, but surely he must know that the Rangers are in such danger at the hands of those wargs. Still nothing over on that choke point over there. The Misty Mountains have been given a bloodied nose, and as a result they haven't really elected to move forward in any capacity. They can't afford to just sort of sit there and wait though while their allies get torn limb from limb. Looks like the Trebuchet might be out of ammunition already, but even the rotting meat could prove to be very, very useful in this situation, given the situation that the attackers are in now. There's a few Lurt's hunting pack remaining. Uruk-hai crossbows the target for the time being. Those Minhiriath archers now out of ammunition, so they will be committed to melee instead. Uruk-hai crossbows trying to shoot at point blank. Rhudaur axemen revealing themselves. I mean, they'll do reasonably well, but the problem is the pikes are going to hold them at bay, and as a unit with low defensive stats, the pikes are also going to be pretty good at dealing damage to them. Most unfortunate from their perspective. The Isengard ballista, we've seen the defending artillery do very well. Now it's time maybe for the attackers to level the playing field a little bit there. Going after Dunland Rangers could prove to be an exceptionally good call. But in the other melee engagements, that's a bit of friendly fire though, which is the danger. I mean, if you're going after those units on the front line, you could very well end up hitting your own men. Unfortunate. On the other engagements though, the Tharbad Warhammers doing their thing. Attacking those Troll Hunters, maybe trying to target them down. So a few units left out here. The Isengard Ballista continues to fire away. The Royal Court of House Rhudaur revealing itself though. And that's a little bit of a disappointing charge, and they're not going to be able to get up to charge speed now. It's almost like the unit is running through treacle. Once that starts happening, you need to cycle back out and get yourself some distance before you charge in again, because otherwise it's just not going to work. And bulldozing your way through over here is risky, given the fact that these are heavy axemen, which cavalry can charge into well enough, but if you get embroiled in a melee engagement with heavy axemen, it's probably going to be fairly troublesome for you. So, unfortunately, as a result of almost 6.5 hours of failing to get this battle replay to run all the way through without crashing towards the final third of it. I'm going to have to give up and do it this way, unfortunately. This is something similar to how I've had to do any Moria replays within the past year or so, because for some reason it just did not want to work. It would always crash around the same sort of area. Not exactly the same, so it wasn't a single thing on the battlefield that was too demanding for the game or the PC or anything like that to handle. I don't know what the problem was, but after this long I'm giving up on it. But I do still want to basically post the replay up, because it was actually quite a good battle, unfortunately, so I do apologise to the Wound Raider for not being able to show this one properly. It's probably one of the better examples of the Cardolan outpost I've managed to show on my channel for quite some time, to be honest, but unfortunately it is what it is. It's one of those situations that really makes me want to take a little bit of a step back on a temporary basis from the channel, honestly, because this has basically swallowed an entire day of my time off, which is rare enough for me these days, and I really don't want to have this sort of thing become a regular occurrence, because already it's feeling a little bit more like work to me than something that's actually fun to do, and I don't want that trend to continue by basically forcing the issue on replays like this going forward. Now, it is worth saying that the new patch didn't seem to have any of the juddering issues that the old patch seemed to have in quite a few of the replays recently, so hopefully if I can show more of the stuff from the new patch as it comes out and as the developers want me to, it will be less of a problem, and I can also do stuff like faction overviews again, which will relent a little bit of the cloud of doom that has descended upon me as a result of replays such as this. There's nothing wrong with the quality of the replay itself, it's more fundamental issues than that, unfortunately, but regardless, it's not ideal, but the closing moments of the battle at the very least I did manage to show on the game's lowest settings whilst way zoomed out from any of the action. It's not how I would have chosen this to go down, but it is what it is. I do think the defenders were worthy victors of this battle in the end, though, as you can see from the crossfire in the first part of the battle that we were able to show unimpeded. A result really of fire arrows and morale shocks from cavalry as well. Really, the defenders managed to utilise the morale mechanics to their advantage better than in many other situations we've seen actually in this game, so they were certainly worthy victors of this one in the end. I am going to be migrating all of the Medieval 2 stuff onto my new PC following on from this. I don't think the PC was actually the problem with this replay though, mainly because there were a couple of crashing to a black screen examples where I thought actually this is just a result of this PC genuinely dying, but equally there were also just as many crashes where it showed Medieval 2 has encountered an error, which generally points to the fact the game itself is under a lot of strain. Again, it does stem a little bit as a result from the cityscape battles utilising those fences. It has been a problem in the past, but generally speaking we've managed to get away with it in this version of the game. It was only a problem in the long ago, back before this patch was a thing, so I'm a little bit sad to see it rear its ugly head once more, but hopefully this will be the only example of such things. But yeah, I will not be sacrificing infinite amounts of my time off basically on stuff like this in the future. If it is broken, I will just bin it basically, and that may result in the odd slot in my usual recording schedule going unfilled, but I've kind of reached the conclusion at this point that so be it. Hopefully when the new patch of the game comes out, you know, the flame can be reignited, so to speak, but there's no way on maps that I've seen several times before that I'm going to be putting myself through this sort of thing again. It's nothing to do with the person who sent me this battle replay, they weren't to know, but yeah, definitely a bit of a deflating situation that. There will be a couple more replays that I need to do on this PC because I've already started the work on them on this one, including on a map we haven't seen and one on Hobbiton, but after those next two I think everything from then on will be on the new PC. At least the recording will be. I might still do the editing and the rendering on this one so that I can actually use my other PC for other things and it's not completely, you know, being hogged essentially by rendering, which is another problem. You know, especially when it comes to wanting to use my own hardware for, you know, just general computer stuff, and it's being occupied essentially by rendering. But anyway, enough of my complaining for now. I'm sure that I'll get over this by tomorrow and this will all have been a rant for nothing, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, because I certainly didn't, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.
This is a clear victory.